Hi there, and welcome back to the Energy Sector Heroes podcast. My name is Michelle Fraser, and every week I will speak with incredible people who share their lessons, experiences, and stories from their time spent in the energy sector. Hi there, and welcome back again to this week's episode. If you're new to the show, then please take a second to subscribe and even consider sharing the show with just one other person. This week I am joined by Monica Collings OBE. Monica is the chair of Powerful Women, which is a very important organisation actually. Monica, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, Michelle, look, thanks for having me on the show. I'm delighted to be with you. My name is Monica Collings. I am the chair of Powerful Women, as you said, but I also run a portfolio of board and non-exec positions, largely across the energy sector, but essentially connecting to net zero. I'm incredibly passionate about advancing the cause of women in leadership positions, and I'm sure we will get on to talking about that in due course.
No, thank you. It's amazing to have you on the podcast. Quite an admirer of you for many years. I want to ask you, as a leader, what does a leadership look like in the energy sector in 2025 and beyond?
Oh, gosh, great question. So let me start by saying that the energy sector has been through a huge amount of volatility and change already over, I've been working within the sector for about the last 8 years, and during that time, it's transformed quite significantly. And moving forward, if we push through to CP 2030 and beyond, there's a whole world of change. We've had COVID, we've then gone into, the invasion of Ukraine, the energy crisis, all the volatility that's come out of that. And I think it's really important context and that we consider that when we think about leadership, because what we're expecting of our leaders is to operate in an environment that is constantly volatile and uncertain and ambiguous. And so their resilience is being tested constantly because they're having to be agile and flexible and respond to what they're seeing around them. They're also working in an environment that is trying to drive innovation and change. And we're also moving from a sector that historically has operated sort of one way, in that energy has flowed to customers. It's been an essential service that they've taken from providers. Whereas this whole new world of energy is going to require all of us to be much more engaged and active in our consumption, in the way that we manage things flexibly, for example, and the opportunities that presents. And so we really have to think about customers in a way that puts them at the heart of decision making. And I think for leaders, that's an incredibly exciting opportunity. I've certainly made my career out of leading through adversity. It's where brilliant leaders are born, I would say.
I think so too, and that leads me on to my next question quite amazingly. So many organisations talk about diversity. How do you move forward from advocacy to tangible actions?
When I link back to thinking about customer and the fact that we've got, all of these customer segments and groups and challenges that we're trying to overcome, it's really important that we make sure that when we're having those conversations and making decisions, that those customers and communities are reflected. And it's only by having that diversity in those conversations that we'll do that, because otherwise, naturally, as humans, we are all biased, we all have blind spots. And it's not because we aren't capable of thinking broadly. Actually, it's just sometimes it doesn't occur to us to consider things that we don't know about. We don't know what we don't know. And for organisations, I think that we have seen a growing warmth towards recognising the value that having diverse teams, leadership teams in particular, sort of guiding the way, but across our organisations, the benefits that brings. How do we move from advocacy to action? Because it's all very well us saying, look, this is what we want, and we're going to, over time, build it into our processes. I think actually we've talked for some time about what gets measured gets delivered, and targeting ourselves on this. It's certainly what Powerful Women has done, is the only way to make sure that we actually commit sufficient time, resources, focus in an intentional way to move the dial. Powerful Women said that, look, we're looking for 40% of women in of female representation in the sector by 2030. In 5 years, if we don't start moving to tangible action, then we're not going to see those numbers achieved. And we're very fortunate that we've got the group of the Leaders Coalition that comes together, that some of the companies, the country's top CEOs of those energy companies that are having this conversation on a quarterly basis, but also going back to their organisations and prioritising it. It would be easy to say that with everything that's going on in America and Trump's policies that DEI is dead, but my observation is that actually we are seeing organisations still embrace the principles of belonging and inclusion. It's just that perhaps they aren't talking about it so much, which I think is sad, desperately sad, because we've come such a long way, but there is still a long way to go.
Okay, but for young women entering into the energy sector, what practical steps should they take to position themselves as a leader for future?
So if I talk personally for a moment, just from my own experiences, I'd say, having worked in lots of male-dominated environments, property, home improvement, automotive, before coming into energy, earlier in my career, I tried to fit in by adopting more male characteristics and behaving more like a man. You're smiling, I'm seeing that resonate, but don't do that. I mean, the thing that makes women powerful is their authenticity, the fact that we bring a different lens. And now that I have reached a certain age and a bit menopausal, I've liberated myself from that. And it feels great, actually. The amount of time and effort you put into pretending to be something that you're not is wasted energy, because you could be using that into developing skills and using your lived experiences to become a better leader, which is ultimately leadership is about, it's a privileged position. It's about connecting on a human level. It's not titles. It's not about status. So I think that's what my first thought. I think the second thing about coming into this sector is there is so much change and there's so much opportunity for people to put their hands up and get involved in amazing initiatives, new businesses that are developing propositions that are exciting and groundbreaking and new for the first time. I think all of that is a perfect opportunity to lead. And it's not about getting a leadership title or position. It's about finding somewhere where you can use your energy and your experience to create value. And if people see that, and you be the person that delivers and that gets involved, that sets you up to become a leader in the future. Okay.
But do you think that a lot of women that work in male-dominant industries do adopt a male stance?
I think that it's natural that they do, because there are so many men. Until you reach that critical mass point of having sufficient women, you just don't reach that tipping point where the balance shifts. One of the great problems I think female leaders often have is they don't ask for what they need. They almost wear this badge of honor that they're struggling through and they're delivering in spite of some of the barriers that they receive. And you're smiling again. I mean, do you recognize that? But I think that when women ask for what they need, and sometimes it's basic human, like health requirements, sanitary bins in toilets, or safe spaces to express milk when you come back from maternity leave. These are things that women need to be able to function in the workplace, because whilst you're busy worrying about other things, you can't focus 100% on what you should be doing at work. And so I think, Michelle, that's part of the conversation.
I think so too. But how do you start that conversation, though?
Well, we do require women to step up and talk about it. And it can't just be through employee resource groups. I think there are multiple ways in which we improve the situation. Of course, if we focus on, recruiting women into our businesses, then we're going to reach that tipping point sooner. But if the environments that we create within those organizations don't meet their needs, then they're not going to stay, because they'll go and work for other sectors where there are more women and where it is easier and where they are recognized and their voices are heard. So those women have to almost come in with a sense of being willing to influence the change. I think for leadership teams within these organizations, they have to recognize that, we've got a skills gap in the sector. We need to go out and attract more talent, looking beyond the energy sector to other sectors to attract this talent makes absolute sense, particularly when we're looking to add a customer lens to more of the work that we're doing. But that will require us to make sure that our environments meet their needs. There are some key areas of focus, I think, that we can get into. Recruitment is one. Where health and well-being, prioritising pro-women policies, flexibility. I mean, the government has changed regulation around that, but some of these things enable us to tap into talent pools that we wouldn't otherwise benefit from.
Yeah, I do agree. Do you think it will be the up and coming generation that will make these changes? Or do you think the changes are happening just now?
I think it's a combination. So I do think that leaders are recognising that things need to evolve. It's at a glacial pace, as the latest Powerful Women State of the Nation report has highlighted. But it is happening. I think the next generation will be less tolerant, is my view. So having sat on youth groups and listened to them talk, when they're looking at which organisations they want to join, they go on LinkedIn. They look at who sits on your leadership team. They will analyse, which female leaders are there. So the girls will look to the women and say, how many women are in that executive team? How many women are sat on the board? What sort of career progression opportunities do I have if I join this business? Because is the business prioritising my career? Because that's what they're looking for. A career for life, the idea that you can come and join this organisation and that you can progress within it is what they're interested in. And if they can do that and they can see that kind of path and how that progresses, if they can't see any women on the executive team, they're going to go and join somewhere else because they'll think it's not a priority for those organisations. So I think that there is a kind of a shift that companies will see.
I was going to say, it's quite a few interesting topics that you brought up there, but one of the ones that I was going to ask you was, nowadays, you can expect to stay with one company long term.
It depends. I think it really depends on, and for me, I would say that individuals must be clear about what motivates them, because we're not all motivated by the same thing, and work doesn't mean the same thing to all of us. So that's your starting point. And it takes a while for individuals to figure out earlier on in their career what it is that makes their hearts sing. I think then you can go into some of these bigger organisations like the BPs of this world, where there are enough different companies and organisations, subsets of the organisation, that you could easily spend your entire career within and it feel like you've got lots of different roles and different opportunities and different companies that you're engaged with. So it is entirely possible in the energy sector. There are lots of big employers that you could go and do that to. Equally, as I described in this sort of future landscape, there are so many innovative new companies that have come down the line. They are, VC or PE backed. They are seeking investment and funding in creating amazing new solutions, particularly in low carbon technologies. And if your heart sings by being in disruptive environments, which involve lots of change making and agility, then probably not. You're probably not going to stay with one business. But that's the beauty of where we are in energy at the moment, is that you can choose and there is choice. And the idea that the next generation are looking for certainty and security over their jobs, I think comes as a consequence of the sort of macro global environment that we find ourselves in and some of the challenges. I mean, you only have to go to the supermarket this weekend to see just how much food inflation is affecting people. And that is going to be a concern, particularly for people leaving university looking for their first job.
That is a really important point as well. But I was also going to ask you, do you really think that a lot of women are going to be influenced by what company they work for, by who sits on their board, if it's predominantly male?
That's what I've heard from these individuals, from these youth groups. They are interested. And I mean, shockingly, the State of the Nation report highlights that 15 out of the top 100 employers in energy that account for almost 300,000 employees across the sector still don't have any women on their board. And personally, I've written to all of their CEOs and chairs and asked them, why? Why do they not have any women on their board? As yet, I have no replies to those letters, but sure as damn it, when we get to September, well, we're in September now, but when we get to kids going back to school, I'll be following up to make sure and that I get answers. Because organisations do need holding to account for the decisions that they're making. And another stat that astounds me is that in executive teams of those top 100 businesses, over 70 don't have any women in their leadership team. How on earth can they actually confirm, affirm, guarantee the customers that they are serving that they are properly and robustly making decisions? I see this as a risk factor for boards, actually. It's a governance concern.
I was going to say to you that, which might be not PC, but do you think that that's going to be, the customers are going to really be interested about who sits on their board?
No, I don't think customers are. But I think what customers will care about is that the way in which these companies are led and that the decisions are being made are in their best interest. And how do companies guarantee that they are taking in the right inputs in order to get to those outputs if they don't have representation? That's the logic. I think, is a customer who is in fuel poverty, let's say, struggling to pay their energy bills, choosing between heating and eating this winter, really going to go and look at an energy company's board and see who's making the decisions? Probably not. From my own experiences, they get very angry and frustrated at the public figure at the head of that company, if they are so inclined, and take to social media and might vent about it or complain about it to the regulator. But the point is, what we're trying to do as a sector is move the conversation on. We're trying to make sure that there is a robustness with the way in which we evolve policies and we leave no one behind in the energy transition. And if we are only taking in the views of those who have never connected to fuel poverty, have absolutely no concept of what that looks and feels like, and that kind of leans into that, then they're not going to be able to make those decisions effectively. And it leans into a sort of broader diversity point. I talk a lot about gender because obviously that's what I champion from my own lived experiences. But it's not just about gender. It's about all characteristics that we need to protect.
Okay, because I was going to ask you the next question. What hidden barriers do you think, I was going to say women or just any minority, face in the energy sector that go unnoticed?
So I'm co-writing a book at the moment with a wonderful lady, Wendy, and we undertook a number of interviews across the sector, many interviews with women in a number of positions, not just leadership positions. And some themes came out of the book out of the research for the book. And I'll talk a bit about some of those. I mean, women having a voice and being heard and being able to articulate that voice is a really big one. And it came out consistently across all of the interviews, whether that is being spoken over, not being invited into conversations, whether it's assumptions about, their position and the way in which they might express themselves, all sorts of scenarios, very different. but the barrier, kind of the key theme that women have their voice diminished, even often, even without men realizing that that is happening, is a big theme. There's another theme that is around, and I think it points to your kind of question earlier around what can organisations do practically, that is connects to sponsorship and mentoring and how we elevate women and support them through their career, because women have more career interruptions than men. They go off, they have babies, they come back. Sometimes there's complications that affects their health. Sometimes they need time out of business. And I was talking to a chap the other day, and he and his wife were level pegging at the start of their career, and then they got married. She went off, she had children, came back. And they have carried out this kind of experiment where, you know, they've looked at the impact, because they started at the same point, on her as a result of these career interruptions. And it's fascinating that actually he's the one who sort of approached me and said, look, I'm interested in talking to you about this, because what can I do about it? Because her career has been impacted. And when I see her trying to get back into the workforce, it's harder. And it's harder for her because she has mum guilt, or because she's got to go and pick up the kids, or, you know, and he's trying to do his bit and provide support in the home, but it's still harder. And he sees the struggles that she faces. So this idea of the motherhood penalty, and how when women are away from work, they don't necessarily have their voice, they're not necessarily in the conversation. Okay, so the idea that, for example, if a big project comes up while a woman's away on maternity leave and she's due to come back, whose name's going to get put in the frame for that? Will it be hers, or will it be the people that are in the room? And examples like that keep these women alive in organisations even when they're not physically there. And, you know, we used to talk about keeping touch days, but it's deeper than that. So how do you have sponsors that can continue to keep your name alive and things like that? So Michelle, I mean, there's so many examples that I could give, and so many different ways that we could take this conversation. I think practically, what do we need? We need organisations to be conscious and intentional about the way in which they include people. Being the only one of your kind, or the first, makes it feel like you have the weight of womankind on your shoulders, or any other protected characteristic, because you feel like you have to be the poster girl. And it is not your job to do that. But you are the first, and therefore you are paving the way in the hope that it becomes easier and better for those that follow you. That's definitely how I felt about it. And when I talk to other people who work in the sector, they do similarly. But they also recognise that organisations should do more of the heavier lifting on this one.
There's quite a few topics that you brought up there. I was going to ask you, do you think that your career really does change after you have children?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a single mum. I've been divorced twice. The first time when I was, my daughter was very, very young, and I had to take thank God this doesn't happen now, but I had to take a 30% pay cut in order to get the flexibility that I needed to go and pick her up from nursery, because I couldn't do a full day. And even though I was going home and I was still working in the evenings, because I didn't want to sacrifice what I was doing, and I was committed to my business, there was always a resentment that I felt. And at a point where I needed support from my business, when I'd gone through this divorce and I was a single mum, I found myself at points eating from a food bank. And I think this is the reality that, you know, for some people, you find yourself in situations that you would not otherwise expect through no fault of your own. And you have to respond to that, and you expect there to be help and support around you. I mean, that is a long time ago now, but thankfully things have moved on. I still expect that some women will experience that kind of behaviour, though.
I'm going to say wow, because I think it's the only thing that I can say. Wow. I can't even believe that. I can't even believe that some companies just treat anybody like that, not even just women, just anybody. it's quite horrific. But
Michelle, did it stop me becoming a chief exec of a billion turnover retail business? No, it didn't. And I think this is the thing, that women are resilient when they need to be, and it shouldn't have to be that way. But you can have it all. It's just you can't have it all at the same time. And there are compromises and sacrifices. I've spoken to other women who have had children and come back into the workforce and felt like they've needed to move organizations because of the experience that they've had as they've come back. Women who have tried to influence change, like talking about expressing milk, perched in a toilet, trying to express milk with an arm leant against a sink rather than having a comfortable chair to sit in for 10 minutes or whatever the time that you need to be able to do that. I find it incredible that in 2025, we still find ourselves without the things that we need in the workplace to enable us to have meaningful careers. And look, things have definitely moved on, but I can't help but feel that there is still a penalty attached to the fact that women are childbearing and the ones that have to leave to go and raise children and then come back and find themselves set back, essentially.
I do believe that as well. But do you not think that finding yourself in that situation has probably motivated you to keep going and to achieve the most that you can?
I would say so. And I think, that idea of being fiercely independent and being able to provide for my children is motivating, incredibly motivating. I mean, I had both my children by C-section. I have had 6 surgeries as a result of complications. So I have had to take time out of my career. One of them was a full laparotomy. I've had laparoscopies. I've had all sorts of things that I've had. I had my ovary removed, which then threw me into early perimenopause. I've had all sorts of challenges as a woman that only a woman would experience as a result of having children. And all of those things, I think, are barriers that I have had to overcome. And it's not through an organization's fault, but that is just life, and that I've had to adapt and overcome and deal with. And then going through that alongside trying to build a meaningful career and develop and progress, it makes you just rethink things. It makes you have a different perspective. I mean, I talk a lot to people, especially young female leaders, about resilience, and you have to look after yourself. You have to put your own oxygen mask on first. You have to, the idea that resilience is about bouncing back and how you approach situations. The idea that the 7 types of rest can be a framework to look after yourself and make sure that you achieve balance in your life so that you can do great things. It sounds a bit kind of spiritual and Buddha almost, I suppose. But I think from my experiences, it's critical that in order to have a meaningful and fulfilling career, and one that has an impact, if that is what you choose, and hey, let's face it, women can do anything they want, you have to recognize that you have to prioritize your well-being and your health, and you have to ask for the things that you need. So we're coming back full circle to what we talked about earlier. Women have to ask for the things that they need.
I think so as well, because I don't have any children myself, but I still think not having children, you can still face a lot of barriers going into your career.
There's a wonderful lady who I'm dear friends with, and she has no children, but she's had elderly parents that she's had to look after. She actually has animals, and one of the animals was very sick, and she had to take time out to look after the animal because that was important to her. We all have things in our lives, and look, I'm not saying that men don't have these challenges as well, but women take on more of the care bearing responsibilities. That is just our society. That's just the way it works. And that can be reflected with women that don't have children. I think that there are ways in which organisations are recognising if they provide flexibility and they provide support to us as employees on a human level, they get the best out of us. And often, particularly for professional services organizations, people are our biggest asset. And so you have to take care of them. Yeah. I think that it's just as simple as that, isn't it?
I think it is as well, actually. I do think it is as well. I was going to ask you another question. What is the boldest leadership decision that you have made, and what have you learned from it?
Boldest leadership decision. Okay, so when I was appointed to the co-CEO role at Iceply Energy, so the business was divested by that time. And in that moment, there was the former CEO was leaving, and myself and the CFO were appointed co-CEOs, and I was CMO at that time. And my boss, she was international, and she came and she said to me, "Look, I'm a bit disappointed in you." I was like, "God, I've only been in the role 5 minutes. What have I done wrong already?" She said, "You didn't put yourself forward for the job, and that was disappointing." And I took that away and I reflected on it, because it wasn't that I didn't think I could do the job or I didn't want the job. It just never occurred to me at that point to put my hand up. And so I was appointed to it because somebody believed in me, rather than because I asked for it or because I wanted it. And what that catalyst of what happened then is that, in terms of being bold and the theme around asking for what you want and need, it shifted in my mindset. And when we closed the business, I had a decision to make. I could have gone back to being in the world of marketing and developing products and innovations and international expansion, all the things that I love, or I could continue to pursue the CEO route that I had now started to take. And that's where I ended up, and that's where my career's developed, and it's led me to where I am now, chairing boards. But it was almost before that bold decision, it was that catalyst moment that spurred me on. And I think in our careers, there are what I would call career defining moments. There are things that happen to you that present you with an opportunity, sometimes before you're even ready or you even realize that you're ready to be able to take those on. And it's in those moments that I think, again, leaders are born.
I think so too. Do you think it is important to take up opportunities even though you don't think you're ready for them?
Absolutely. That's how we grow and stretch ourselves. And as long as you recognize that you don't have to know it all, or that you need help and support, and you ask for help, and you surround yourself with people who are brilliant and clever, sometimes cleverer than yourselves as well, to get that help that you need, how else do you grow? I think we all find ourselves in situations doing things that frighten and scare us, and that's a good thing. It should be like that. There are people who go to work and they are quite happy to remain as they are, stay in the same job for 20, 30 years, and don't want progress. They don't want to advance. They don't want to develop and become leaders. I've seen that, and I've had conversations with those individuals. But they still want stretch. They still want to know they're doing a good job, and that what they're doing is meaningful and contributing. And so sometimes recognizing, well, in fact, always recognizing what you see in others is part of being a leader, and helping them with providing those opportunities. One of the people that I spent some time with was adamant that they did not want leadership responsibility, did not like leading people, for a big challenge, and hated it. They ended up becoming an amazing mentor to graduates coming into the organization, just by nature of the approach and the kindness that they took to supporting those individuals. That's leadership. That's leadership in a different guise. So I think liberating people from perhaps limiting beliefs that they have over their own capabilities sometimes can be useful.
Yeah, and that is really important as well. I was going to ask you, what advice do you have for the young professionals coming into the energy space?
Oh gosh, Lots of advice. But if I were to boil it down to one thing, I would say, this sector is in your hands. You are going to be the generation that delivers net zero, that makes the difference. My generation is paving the way in that we are setting the foundations for this and setting the strategies, but you'll be delivering it and you'll be the ones that leave that legacy. So get involved, like roll your sleeves up, get involved in it and take those opportunities that are offered to you. I think the other thing is, and I live by this sort of by those principles, is always be curious, ask the questions, be curious about everything, find out and challenge, and don't just accept things. The energy sector is one that is evolving at pace, and it is creating a future landscape that doesn't exist yet. And they will have amazing value to contribute as part of that journey. So yeah, be curious and get involved.
And that is really good advice. It's really good advice. How would they get involved though?
So beyond just their jobs, there are so many amazing networks to be part of. There's so many different schemes. There are development opportunities, there are courses, all sorts of things. Like I have found my home in energy and in this sector, and I have never felt so welcome because of the extent of those networks that exist. Find your tribe, wherever that tribe is. And it could be championing women. It could be that if you're a woman in an organisation that is feeling a little bit isolated, go and find that tribe and make some friends. It could be that there are some amazing young energy professional organisations out there. But if it's for people earlier on in their career that they're looking for that support, quite often, and particularly for women, you don't necessarily know that you will recognise that you need that support until it's a bit too late. For older women who might be going through menopausal change, maybe it is an employee resource group that you can help set up rather than wait for your organisation to create that spearheads how a menopause policy could be developed in your business if one doesn't exist. We can sit and we can wait for things to happen to us, or we can be the change.
I do agree with that, and I'm going to end the interview on that positive note. So that's all the questions I have today. I would like to thank Monica for her time. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening and see you next week. That brings us to the end of another episode. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, I'd like to gently encourage you to leave a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts and share the show with another person. You can also follow me on LinkedIn or via my website, www.michellefraserconsultancy.com. Thanks again for listening and see you next week.